Love is a beautiful feeling about which books, music, and films are written. However, when it is the perverse love of a sick person, it can be so destructive that it ruins many fates. The cunning of some villains knows no bounds. The perpetrator can hide so well that until the last moment it is not clear whether they are crying, genuinely grieving, or shedding crocodile tears and rejoicing in the bloody triumph. The incident we are discussing today occurred in St. Paul Park, Minnesota, USA, half an hour's drive from Minneapolis. A close-knit community of about 5,000 people lived there. During the holidays, residents transformed the town into a luminous paradise where every decorated house smelled warm and cozy. The couple, Daniel and Deborah Larson, also lived here. On February 24, 1988, their daughter Kristine was born. She was the youngest of the couple's 4 children, and before her birth, the couple had taken an 8-year break. The older children helped their parents and took care of Kristine. From the beginning, she stood out among the other children due to her activity and agility. Kristine had always been like that and maintained this joy for life until her last breath. In 2004, at the age of 16, she began a relationship with her boyfriend, Zachary Matthews. The couple's relationship developed well. In 2006, she had a son named Darren. During her pregnancy, Kristine moved in with her boyfriend to her parents' house to receive support from her mother and loved ones. She spent almost all her free time at the Larson home and they became very close. For Kristine, the boy was everything. Her life revolved around motherhood and housework. Zachary seemed to be a loving and caring father. However, after a few months of living together, they felt they wanted to become more independent and moved out of the parents' house. He himself grew up in a difficult family with an alcoholic father who regularly turned to drink and constantly abused his child morally and physically. Nevertheless, his difficult childhood did not turn Zachary evil. He was determined to build healthy relationships and raise normal children. He saw his parents as an anti-example that should not be repeated under any circumstances. Kristine never took illegal substances, disliked alcohol, and avoided loud parties. She shunned dubious companies and everything related to criminality. Before giving birth, she fully focused on impending motherhood. However, she thought ahead. She didn't want to be a burden on her parents and wanted to be financially independent from them. Kristine wanted to try her hand at various fields to then choose the most promising direction. So, she enrolled in bartending school and then intended to attend nursing school. Unfortunately, all these ambitious ideas were doomed to fail. On the evening of December 19, 2007, 19-year-old Kristine wanted to bake Christmas cookies with her mother Deborah. It was a family tradition to bake her grandmother's typical cookie recipe every New Year's Eve. Kristine planned to return by evening to do so, and in the afternoon she set off for her own business. Her mother stayed at home with her husband and adult children, waiting for her daughter's return. Evening came, but she still wasn't there. They tried calling Kristine but couldn't reach her. Her mother was worried but wanted to give her daughter a little more time. Perhaps she was delayed for a good reason and would soon return. Deborah had no idea that while she was worrying and trying to call Kristine, about half an hour from their home, around 8 p.m., an emergency call center received a report from a man. A passerby reported that a vehicle was on fire in the alley near his house. The man initially only called to report the burning car, but then became interested in what was happening and looked more closely. Just a few minutes after the first call, a second call came in. According to the same witness, there was a person inside the car. When firefighters and police arrived at the scene, it was already too late. Inside the cabin was the charred body of a person. The face was not heavily damaged, making it obvious that a woman had died. Additionally, ligature marks from a foreign object were visible on the neck, and there were hemorrhages in the eyes, indicating prolonged and very strong compression of the neck. Officers noted that the victim was not wearing a jacket or shoes. Although it was cold in Minnesota on December 19, this seemed strange, as one could simply freeze to death without warm clothing. Against this background, the police assumed that the victim had died elsewhere and the car with the body had been brought there to set it on fire and cover up the evidence of the crime. During the examination of the burned car, fire experts concluded that the fire had started in the back seat. An almost completely burned phone book was found there. During the search of the car, a wallet was found containing a driver's license issued in the name of Kristine Larson. It also contained a photo of her and her son. A child seat was left in the back seat. It was empty. This alarmed the police officers. It was not known what had happened to the baby. The police officers believed that it could be in danger. The man who had reported the burning car to emergency services came out to speak with investigators. The car was parked a few dozen meters from his garden, but neither he nor his wife had any idea what kind of vehicle it was. Thanks to their information, however, it was possible to clarify the time frame. Judging by the couple's statements, the car appeared here around 7:30 p.m. The car and the body were taken for examination. It was determined that Kristine had died as a result of strangulation. Apparently, the young mother was struck on the head with a blunt object, after which some kind of cord or wire was wrapped around her neck, and she was then strangled. It was obvious that this was a brutal, premeditated murder, and burning the car was intended to obscure the traces and hinder the investigation. While all this was happening, the deceased's family was still at home, wondering why Kristine had not returned. Her mother was still waiting for her daughter to help her bake cookies. Her father, Daniel, however, tried to calm everyone. He convinced his wife and reminded her that Kristine was a 19-year-old woman who wanted to go out and have fun. Above all, she was a very energetic and quite spontaneous person. So they turned on the television and sat down to watch a movie, believing their daughter was spending time with her friends. Since both had to go to work in the morning, the couple decided to forego baking that evening and do it later. However, when the Larsons turned on the television before going to bed and saw the news, they saw a report that a young woman had been found dead in a burning car. They didn't even consider that it might have been Kristine. Deborah and Daniel looked at each other and almost unanimously thought how terrible it was to be the parents of the young woman who had died in such a cruel manner. With these thoughts in mind, they turned off the television and went to bed. Around in the morning, there was a knock at the Larsons' door. When the couple opened the door, police officers from the Minneapolis Police Department were standing there. The entire team made their way into the kitchen, where an officer informed the parents of the tragic news. Another unpleasant piece of news for them was the disappearance of the deceased son, Darren. The police had hoped to find the child at Kristine's parents' house, but he was indeed not there. No one had the slightest idea where the child was at the moment. He had been visiting his father's house during the day. The police called Zachary. To everyone's relief, it turned out that his son was with him. The young father didn't understand why he was being disturbed so late and thought it might be about Kristine. He said they had planned to meet that day and go shopping together, but she had disappeared and simply ignored all his calls. Consequently, Z spent the day with Darren and went to bed confused. When Deborah now delivered the terrible news to him over the phone, he burst into hysterical crying. Zachary managed to calm down. The deceased's mother invited him and the child to stay with her. During this time, they wanted to unite to better cope with the consequences of this terrible tragedy. The young man immediately agreed. The police wanted to speak with the deceased's parents to clarify the circumstances of the last days of Kristine's life. The couple immediately provided interesting information. As it turned out, Zachary and Kristine had separated 2 months before these events. They maintained a cordial relationship for the sake of the child, continued to communicate as friends, but did not live together. This happened about 2 months before the tragedy. However, Kristine's parents still considered Zachary part of the family. Firstly, he was the father of their grandson and wanted to be fully involved in the child's life. Secondly, he never gave up hope of getting Kristine back. They said that the young parents lived in the family home for quite some time. Eventually, they decided to move to St. Paul's. The couple rented an apartment about 15 minutes away. After the move, however, the parents noticed that Kristine was not very happy with her family life. Z was drawn to parties and entertainment, but that did not align with the young mother's ideas. Despite her modern and active lifestyle, Kristine now wanted a domestic environment, peace and quiet to focus on the baby. She didn't like that her boyfriend saw things differently. He wasn't on the same wavelength as her. He was constantly on the go. He could leave Kristine with the baby in the middle of the night. Therefore, after a few months, she decided to separate and return to the family home. According to Deborah, she last saw her daughter on that fateful day, December 19, around 1 p.m. She had plans until the evening. First, Kristine wanted to drop off her friend Marcella, drive to the gas station, and then meet Zachary, go for a walk, and pick up her 2-year-old child. This was valuable information. The police went directly to the gas station where she planned to meet her friend and fill up her car. The video footage was seized, and Kristine was quickly found on it. Everything seemed calm. She went into the store and even joked with the salesperson, met her friend Marcella, and was obviously in good spirits. Nothing compromising or disturbing was visible on the camera recordings. It was now decided to meet Zachary. On the morning of December 20, 2007, the young man voluntarily came to the station for a routine contact. He admitted that Kristine had not even come to him. He recounted that they had a close relationship, solidified by the child. Zachary still maintained a cordial relationship with the murdered woman and her family. Furthermore, Darren's biological father admitted that they still loved each other and therefore often spent time together. The two supposedly considered it possible to get back together in the future. But at that point, Kristine no longer wanted to observe her boyfriend's party lifestyle. She wanted to focus on herself and her son. Zachary admitted that his fondness for parties with his friends made him appear unstable in his beloved's eyes. But he was so relaxed after his hard work, that was the reason for the separation. Nevertheless, they continued to maintain a rather loving relationship. This contradicted the statements of the victim's parents. They never said anything about Kristine and Z wanting to resume their life together. Even on his social media page, the boyfriend noted that they were married, although they had never officially tied the knot. Kristine repeatedly asked him to remove this tag, but he refused, hoping they would rekindle the relationship and actually get married. The young man also revealed that he and the deceased had shared plans for December 19. She was supposed to pick up her son around 2 p.m. All three wanted to go Christmas shopping. The couple also wanted to stop by the Christmas festival so the baby could experience everything. He was not even 2 years old yet. Although he was still too young and probably didn't understand anything, Zachary called his girlfriend at 2:20 p.m. then a few more times, but Kristine ignored him. Z then decided to take the bus with his son and go to the festival alone. He believed that Kristine would call and come along once she showed up. The young man didn't want to waste any time. Around 3 p.m. he made this decision. He picked up the child and they set off together. The son and his father arrived at the festival around 4 p.m. They only stayed there for about an hour. Firstly, the noise bothered the baby, and Zachary didn't want to disturb him at night. Secondly, he didn't want to stay there long without Kristine's company, and she hadn't contacted him. Thirdly, he believed that by then she might have returned for the baby and was waiting for him. When he returned home, according to the young man, no one was there. According to his statements, he spent the rest of the evening and night there until he received the disturbing call from his beloved's family. The man's alibi was quickly confirmed, as there were special registration forms at the festival that had to be signed upon arrival. Upon checking, Zacharias's signature was found. Furthermore, several witnesses were found who confirmed that they had seen the young father and his child at the event. Although he managed to become the main suspect, he was immediately removed from the list. After the news of Kristine's murder, he wrote on his social media page that he missed her and would do everything for his son to ensure the boy smiled as the deceased would have wanted. While investigators visited the festival and confirmed Zacharias's words, a new possible lead was found, reported by friends of the deceased. According to them, Kristine had recently met a new young man named Derek shortly before her death. Investigators checked the man's alibi and decided to contact Derek and arrange a meeting with him at the station. However, it was not possible to reach the young man. Consequently, the police began searching for him more actively as it looked suspicious. It turned out that he had not come to work on December 20, the day after Kristine's death. Everyone who knew him had not seen him since that day, which seemed an even stranger coincidence. He neither showed up for his work shift nor responded to calls. Technically, the young man had therefore disappeared. A lot of fuss was made, and it worked. Already on December 21, with the help of Derek's friends, it was possible to reach him and even make contact with the young man to persuade him to voluntarily speak at the station. According to the man's confession, he saw his girlfriend on December 19 at 2:15 p.m. According to him, he was on St. Paul Park Street near his apartment when she drove past. As it turned out, his apartment was within walking distance of Zachariah's apartment. According to the timeline reconstructed by her, Kristine was on her way to her ex's house to pick up the baby. Derek waved to her and she stopped. Kristine confirmed that she was indeed on her way to pick up Darren. They spoke briefly about their upcoming meeting and decided they could meet later that evening or the next day. Kristine then drove off and promised to call him but simply never contacted him again. In his opinion, there was nothing unusual in her behavior or demeanor. She was looking forward to the upcoming holidays with her family and was, as always, in good spirits. The police believed Derek. He behaved calmly, appeared confident, answered questions clearly, and aroused no suspicion. The man's statements were confirmed after surveillance tapes from one of the houses had been checked. He accurately described the meeting with her and then genuinely left without appearing suspicious. Derek explained his strange disappearance from work by saying he had taken time off. His superiors had also confirmed this. Only the original explanation had been lost. Nevertheless, the situation confused investigators. They didn't want to write off the man and miss the last lead. Judging by the time intervals the young man had provided, Derek was the last person to have seen Kristine alive. This placed him at the top of the list of murder suspects. They managed to obtain search warrants, including one to check the boyfriend's phone records. As much as the police tried to link the victim's new boyfriend to the crime, they couldn't. They were in different places all day, met for only 5 minutes, and then parted ways. The investigators simply didn't have enough information, however. They noticed that there was a highway near the burning car with the body. Along the highway, there were numerous surveillance cameras and checkpoints. Officers decided to use this to try to capture the moment the victim was driven there in her car and set on fire. When this failed, they decided to look for violations or inappropriate driving on December 19. It turned out that an unidentified man contacted emergency services that night. He reported reckless driving and described an unknown man driving on the highway from Minneapolis towards St. Paul Park. According to the description, the driver looked like an old acquaintance of the investigators, but not Derek but Zachariah. Investigators were once again confused about Kristine's ex-boyfriend and now decided to check his phone records. They managed to find out that his initial words were a lie. instead of being home all night with the baby. He was on the state highway between St. Paul and Minneapolis. The police knew that the main suspect was staying with the victim's parents at their invitation during this time. This provided a good opportunity to search the young man's apartment in his absence. The first thing that caught the investigators' attention were the numerous phone books that Zachary, for some reason, kept in his apartment. They were identical to those found in the back seat of the burned car. A few people kept such a quantity of these books, and the coincidence seemed strange. In addition, blood splatter-like stains were found on one of the corridor walls. A luminol test confirmed that it was indeed blood. More stains were found with luminol. During the examination of the bedroom, splatters were also found on Zacharias's mattress. The entire apartment was subjected to this test, and it turned out that there were many areas with suspicious blood traces. The most interesting piece of evidence, however, was a 4-page letter that was clearly addressed to Kristine but was never given to her. In it, he described in vivid detail how much he missed his relationship with her and wanted her back. This was in stark contrast to his original statement that they intended to move in together. Subsequently, he claimed he supported Kristine and was happy she had a boyfriend. That was a blatant lie. He had suffered from the separation and was therefore perhaps jealous when he learned about Derek. In reality, he wanted her back from the beginning. The couple's relationship was not that simple. They often argued, sometimes the neighbors even called the police, but it never came to violence. Kristine's parents knew about the heated arguments, but they did not consider Z dangerous. The next important find was a pair of shoes discovered in Zach's closet. They matched Kristine's description. Interestingly, one of the shoes was missing a shoelace. Investigators concluded that this was the shoe whose shoelace the perpetrator might have used to strangle the young woman. While investigators awaited the results of the DNA tests, they contacted the deceased's family as they considered it important to keep them informed of their findings. It was possible that the Larsons were in mortal danger at that moment, as they were living under the same roof as the suspect. When the police informed Daniel and Deborah about this, the boyfriend was just a few meters away from them, on the other side of the wall in his room. The murdered woman's parents struggled to cope with the situation but decided to help the police. After the call, they approached him and told him that the police wanted to speak with him again. The parents showed all possible restraint and composure so as not to betray the investigators' true intentions. When Zachary received this news, he was very upset from the beginning. The young man stated that he absolutely wanted the investigation to be finally concluded and the perpetrator found. Within an hour, he was on his way to the police station. It was clear from the start that he would not be treated as a witness. Z found himself in an interrogation room. The police were quite strict with him because he repeatedly insisted on his version of events. He kept saying he had been at the festival and had a solid alibi. But the investigators said they knew he was lying and wanted to hear the truth. According to the investigators, they invited him for questioning because they realized his story was partially fabricated. They didn't lay all their cards on the table, hoping that the suspect would betray himself with contradictory excuses. All this went on for about 3 hours. When they realized that this tactic yielded nothing, they pulled out the letter they had found in the apartment, which was addressed to Kristine. They decided to put pressure on him as the ex-boyfriend had told her how much he loved her. The letter contradicted the young man's story. He began to justify himself again but noticeably lost confidence. Playing with the main suspect's emotions had managed to break him. Finally, Z decided to tell a new, but this time true version of the story. However, it was not what investigators expected to hear. According to Zachary, he had gone to the store shortly before 2 p.m. hoping to arrive before his beloved. When he returned with his son, he found Kristine lifeless in the living room closet. The the same place where the police found the shoes during their search. At the same time, Z said that he was so frightened when he discovered her that he decided to hide the body. He didn't want to get into trouble with the law, but he knew they wouldn't believe his story. The best thing he could think of was to drive the deceased in a car to the outskirts of town and set it on fire there. According to Z, he did exactly that and then simply drove away, after which he walked more than 10 km back to his apartment. During all this time, little Darren was left unsupervised in his house. According to the perpetrator, he didn't even set the car with the body on fire, so he doesn't know what or how things continued after he moved towards the house. Of course, none of this sounded plausible at all. His story didn't even include that he had gone to the festival with the boy, so it was a blatant lie. From the main suspect's words, it was clear that he was not involved in any of the events, but for some reason, he appeared at all stages of the massacre and the subsequent actions related to confusing the investigation. Of course, this was not a full confession, but the police now believed they could more accurately reconstruct the chronology of events from December 19, 2007. According to the investigators, Kristine had indeed arrived at her ex's apartment after speaking with her new boyfriend between 2:15 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. It was assumed that Zachary wanted to talk to her about rekindling their relationship, but everyone knew that the young mother had no intention of doing so and had even met with the new boyfriend. Z probably didn't know about Derek, but Kristine confessed the new relationship to him, which triggered a jealous rage. Only the perpetrator himself could provide more details, but he wouldn't budge. In any case, a conflict arose between the young people, leading to murder. All of this happened in front of their son, but he was too young to understand anything at all. To create an alibi, Zachary subsequently took Darren and drove him by bus to the Christmas festival. He simply left the body of his beloved in the apartment. When he returned, he left the child alone, but took the body with him and decided to find a place where he could abandon Kristine's car and erase his tracks. The arson was planned in advance, otherwise, the perpetrator would not have taken one of his bulky phone books from the house. Although the fire was provoked, it did not have as strong an effect as Z had planned, and enough traces of the crime were found on the body. Forensic evidence showed that the blood in his apartment belonged to Kristine. The shoelaces were the murder weapon, and his DNA samples were found in Kristine's car. On December 24 of the same year, Christmas Eve, the man was formally arrested and charged with the murder of Kristine Larson. A little less than a year passed. In October 2008, a jury found Z guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The deceased child was then handed over to Kristine's parents. They raised him as their son. Strangely, even Kristine's former boyfriend, with whom she was briefly together, played quite an important role in the child's life. He regularly interacted with him and wanted with all his might to remind him what a wonderful person his mother was. Despite the short relationship, Derek considered Kristine a beautiful woman and grieved for her greatly. He wanted Darren to never forget his mother under any circumstances. Zachary is still behind bars. He has never confessed to the murder and insists that he was framed. For this reason, it is impossible to accurately reconstruct what Kristine experienced before her death and also to learn the motive for the crime. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a like. That helps a lot with its dissemination. Also, leave a comment to support the channel and recommend the video further. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Thanks for watching and take care.